episode of Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to what is sure to be a very interesting episode of Surviving the Survivor. It is the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And tonight, maybe an exception because it's going to be very fascinating, I think. And I put out a video earlier. We are discussing the trial, the so-called overdose trial in Los Angeles that's going on right now. Two defendants. One is David Pearce. Well, his sister has never spoken publicly to anyone about this. There's been a 48 hours done. There's a podcast about it. It's a fairly high profile case. And we connected, and I told her, promised her that STS Nation is the best community, true crime or not, very supportive. And she, really wanted to come on, and she's not wanting to show her face, which is why you're seeing a black box there. And we welcome Allie to the show. Allie, I know it's got to be a nerve-wracking moment. I'm going to get into the details of this in 1 second, but how are you feeling right now? You okay?
Yes, I'm feeling okay. Just a little nervous, but yes, I know this will be really helpful.
Okay, good. Saw Josh on the 48 Hours episode on this case years ago. So this trial just began January 10th, 2025. It's going on in downtown LA, even with those horrific fires. It centers on these two women, one a model, the other an architect from Mexico, two young women. They were drugged, the R word, and basically left to die outside two different LA hospitals. The people accused of the crimes were wearing masks. They removed the license plates from the car. And authorities later revealed that the women had consumed a toxic mix of heroin, MDMA, cocaine, fentanyl, ketamine, and GHB, together obviously proving fatal. The other best guest tonight, besides Allie, you got Josh Ritter, one of the best of the best. He's a criminal defense attorney in LA, host of Courtroom Confidential, an award-winning prosecutor of the year, former prosecutor in Los Angeles. Josh, by the way, professionally, Josh is related to this case. Christy Giles, one of the women who wound up left at the hospital, no longer with us. She's married to a gentleman named Jan Silliers, or I should say was married. She met him. Josh can tell us that story. They met at Burning Man of all places. And Josh is representing him. Again, his name is, I believe, Jan Silliers, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yes.
Josh, how you guys holding up? I don't have my Dodgers jersey. However, I did order an LA Strong Dodgers shirt and an LA Strong Dodgers hat that I'm going to wear. But how are you? I know you weren't in the path of the fire, but how you doing?
We're doing good. Thank you for asking. It is, it's a pretty tremendous impact on the community out here. I have friends who've lost homes, childhood homes they lived in since they were born. My brother's still evacuated, still a lot of smoke and ash in the air, but all of my loved ones, friends and family are all safe. They're just dealing with kind of the continued, devastation from all of this. And I think we will be for quite some time.
Yeah. It's what happened there. Some people say it literally looks like an atomic bomb was dropped on the Pacific Palisades. It's just gone, which is crazy. But third and final best guest who has a heart out, as they say, in about 50 minutes, Nina Hobson. She's a former British detective. She worked covert operations, major crime, close personal protection. She's investigated all sorts of crime, including murder, the R word, kidnap, global fraud cases. And she has kind of an affinity, Nina does, to sex trafficking cases, cases revolving around sex crimes. But Nina, same question to you. LA is a big place. Are you okay? Is your home okay? And it's been a wild 2 weeks there.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you, Joel. Same as Josh. You know, everybody's affected by this, and we were evacuated several times and then went home again. And it's like a war zone out here when you drive by. But you know, my immediate family and friends are safe, and you can rebuild a house. It's going to take time, and the community has been above and beyond. So everybody's working together. But thank you again for asking.
Yeah. That is Josh's client there, the guy in the hat. He's married to Christy Giles. She was 24 years old when she passed away, a model, obviously a very beautiful woman from Alabama who moved to LA to pursue modeling. And then this person here is Hilda Cabrales-Arzola, which I would not say quite as well as the COE could say it, but she's an architect by trade and from Mexico. She graduated at the top of her class in Monterrey, Mexico. So, Allie, let me start with you. How did you first get wind that your own brother was being brought up on these charges, and your reaction? And I know that you hadn't been talking to him prior to that.
Yeah, we haven't really we haven't really spoken in 10 plus years. We just never really saw eye to eye on things, and anytime I did spend with him when we were younger, maybe in my early 20s or late 20s, I just didn't enjoy being around him. So I chose not to really have a relationship with him. But to answer your question, how did I hear about it? I remember where I was. I was walking my dogs and my mom called and told me, this was before actually, though, he was arrested. This was probably just a couple days after it happened. And my mom told me what my brother had told my mom and my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I even knew then that she wasn't even getting the full story. It just seemed like there were a lot of pieces missing. And I kept asking her questions, and she clearly didn't have the answers. But he called both my parents to tell them, and they told me.
I'm going to apologize to Nina and Josh because I'm fascinated by what you've been through. So I'm going to focus a lot of questions on you, and we will get to Josh and Nina. Now, you come from, I understand, a family of 4 from the East Coast. Your father sadly passed away, and it was a 2-year anniversary on the day this trial started. Is that right?
Correct. It was quite a day.
Well,
Very
sorry.
hard.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that. And so it was your brother and your mother. Now, your mother actually has not been in court, but I think you said she was going for the first time yesterday to support your brother. Do you have mixed emotions about that?
Oh, yeah. And I think she flew in yesterday, but today was the first day she actually went to court. Yes, it's definitely caused some issues between her and I, because I think she wants to support him as a mother, and has constantly told me, since I actually do not have children of my own, that I don't understand about unconditional love. And she loves him and wants to show support, even though she doesn't agree with, what he's done. But I feel like her being there and not speaking her truth or how she feels shows support in what he's done, in addition to her love for him. And it's very hard for me because I don't feel like I don't support him in any way whatsoever. I want nothing to do with him for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And so for her to sit there and support him is very hard for me.
Yeah. Allie, I think I could share this. One of the things we talked about last night is that you almost feel like a pariah, or like a leper. Like you feel like society is looking at you strangely, and that's one of the reasons you wanted to come on. I know you also want to sort of talk about the victims and apologize to them, but I just want you to know that, and I'm getting chills saying this, that you're not your brother, and your brother's not you, and it's a very brave step to come forward, and we really appreciate that you're doing it here. And I told you last night, I'm not one of those pushy guys, but I think you mentioned that you did want to do this. So we will continue to talk about it. Nikki Cuds, friend of mine, this must be tearing your family apart. Was your family kind of being torn apart prior to the arrest? I assume it was, because you were estranged from your brother. What was it that finally made you say you don't want to be, related to him in the sense of having a relationship?
Prior to this, or
Yeah, prior to this, because you said
Okay.
you weren't talking to him for like 10 years, right? So what was the moment that you said, I just can't talk to my brother anymore?
There were a lot of things that happened. I went to visit him. Well, my mom and I both went to LA, and she had friends in Huntington Beach, and she was staying with them. And I was going to stay and spend a couple days, quote unquote, bonding with my brother. I was probably in my late 20s, and he's 4.5 years younger than me. And we got into an argument, and he pretty much left me there and refused to come back and get me. And I had to call my mom, and she and her friends had to drive up from Huntington Beach to where I think I was in Santa Monica. Actually, I remember he left me at this restaurant because we had a huge fight, and I walked to the Palominos. I only remember that because we have one in San Francisco, and I had to call my mom and basically tell her that I was stuck there and I needed her to come and get me. And basically, I never wanted to speak to him again after that. And we would have small conversations here and there, but he just lied. He lied to everyone, and every opportunity my parents were able to provide for him, he ruined by being manipulative, being dishonest, showing off. I couldn't stand the person that he stood for. I felt like he is an epitome of a total douchebag. I'm sorry, but
That's fine.
and he just stood for everything I disagreed with, how your money buys everything. And he lied about what he did and who he was. And he just portrayed a person he really wasn't. And to me, he was utterly just fake. And I couldn't stand being around him, really.
A lot of people chiming in saying that they have, toxic relationships with their own siblings. And I knew there would be people here who are going to support you. But Nina Hobson, it's not frequently you'll see families of the victims. I think it's less frequently that you've got a defendant, especially in a trial that's going on currently, where a family member is brave enough to kind of speak up and speak out and wanting to apologize, even though she has absolutely no reason to the victims' families. What do you make of Allie stepping forward here for the first time ever? Again, 48 Hours has done a show. There's a podcast dedicated just to this story. Other podcasts have done it. What do you think of this kind of bravery that she's willing to come out and express herself about a brother that she no longer talks to?
I think you just used the right word with bravery there. Ali, thank you for doing this. And I know how difficult it is. And as a ex-police officer and being heavily involved in victim side of things and also the defendant side of things, you have done nothing wrong. This is your brother's trial. This is your brother's actions. And just because you are by blood connected to him does not mean you have anything to do with this. The sad thing for me, and I see it time and time again, is the fact that regardless of who you are, because you are associated to this person through blood, through whatever it might be, you are treated appallingly as if you are guilty. And Ali, don't let that be something that happens to you or for you to take any blame or responsibility. And that's just how society behaves. So thank you for coming on and being brave and honest.
Yeah. Pickleball Paul, Allie, has a question for you. Are you on the witness list? Were you subpoenaed for this trial?
No. I actually, at the last minute, contacted the prosecutor, I believe, Catherine. Is that correct? I think that's her name. Because I did want to say something kind of like what I want to do here. And before I contacted you, but I never really heard.
I'm sorry, it's Catherine Mariano. I don't know if Josh knows her, but she is the deputy DA in this case. But go ahead, Allie.
So I did contact her and asked her if there was a way I could either speak or at least maybe even be called as a character witness for the prosecution or the prosecutor's side, and she never got back to me. So no, I'm not. I know my mom was asked to speak on my brother's defense, but she chose not to as well.
And I want to also invite you guys, STS Nation, Nina, and Josh, if you have questions, instead of the triple Q, but if you have questions for Allie, just put a triple A, as in like the car service, like people that come to tow you away. Put in a triple A, and I'll get questions to Allie. And keep in mind, this trial is happening right now. It is not over. It's mid-trial right now. And of course, David Pearce, her brother, is presumed innocent, as the other co-defendant is. And Josh, one of the defenses, which we'll get more into, is basically that day, the way I understand it, you know the case much better than I, these people were all at a rave, an LA rave, where people are doing drugs and partying and drinking. And then David would lure women in by basically pretending to be a Hollywood talent manager and a music executive. And so he was able to kind of coax these two women, Christy, Giles, and the other, to come back to his house. And he was there with a guy named Brant Osborne. And there's a third person who was ultimately not charged, but he basically flipped on them. I don't know. What do you make of this case up to this point? It is midstream, and he is presumed innocent until guilty. And from a defense standpoint, how do they prove that these two women died from the drugs from David Pearce and Brant Osborne, and not from this rave party beforehand?
Yeah, that is something I'm sure that the defense is going to try to make a big point of, is that, listen, you know, it's an unfortunate reality that in this country, you know, thousands of people die every year from overdoses. And that is true. And that people do sometimes go out and they take drugs, and they take party drugs. And sometimes those things are laced with something they weren't expecting, and that can lead to fatalities. That's absolutely true. And I imagine that will be kind of the cornerstone. We've already seen that in their opening statements from the defense. Pardon me. I will say, too, one thing that I want to make clear, and that Jan, who I represent, wants to be made abundantly clear to, is that Christy and Hilda, they were not living some sort of like high risk lifestyle. It wasn't like they were just you know, living this party lifestyle of drugs every single night and kind of a fast paced, you know, careless sort of an existence. They were both, you know, Hilda was in college. Christy was pursuing her career. They were just two young women who were out for a fun night, like so many people do. Now, yes, that night did include taking drugs, and that did include taking drugs, you know, willfully, with their own consent. They were taking part in party type drugs. Where this case distinguishes itself is when they met Mr. Pearce and Mr. Osborne and went back to their apartment, because then it started to take on the elements of a sexual assault. And some of the chemicals that they found in their system is consistent with that. As the investigation went on, we find out that there is a far more sinister background to Mr. Pearce. And I am so appreciative of Allie for coming on this show and being brave enough to talk about this. And I'm going to say some really awful things about her brother, but he is really shaping out to be a predator and a monster. And he is charged with 2 murders in connection to Christy and Hilda, but he is also charged with 7 prior sexual assaults, all involving either force or the drugging of women. When they realized that history that he had, these were uncharged crimes that that had been reported, but for whatever reason, and we could get into the shortcomings of the LADA's office, why they weren't filed before then. But when they found out this dramatic violent predator-like history that they had. Now it's no longer a case of an anomaly, a case of an accident, a case of a tragic overdose. This looks like a person who's been playing fast and loose, playing with fire, playing a very dangerous game with people's lives, and it finally ended up taking the lives of these two young, beautiful women. And that's why I am very proud of the DA's office for being as aggressive as they have been in this case. And they didn't view it simply as another overdose and a tragedy. They viewed it as the murder that it is.
Josh, if I understand you correctly, and there's some questions pouring in for Allie, but if I understand you correctly, they're able through toxicology reports to kind of pinpoint the drugs that David Pearce and Brant Osborne had, and that's what they found in their system, and that's why they think it was the drugs that they were given by them specifically that could have caused the OD. Is that right?
I don't know if they are able to actually say that these drugs in their system we can match to other drugs that might have been recovered from the defendant's home or on their person and say those are the same drugs. But what they can say is that they had drugs in their system which are not consistent with party drugs, that are consistent with R-word type drugs, and that it looked like these are drugs they were not taking with consent, that these were drugs that had a far more nefarious purpose behind them. And then given that history, it kind of, falls into place that that's likely what was taking place this evening as well.
And by the way, Josh, am I correct that they just met at that party that night? Did they have a prior relationship?
Just met that evening. They were out. They had been to a couple of other, bars. They ended up at this kind of warehouse after hours party where they met Pearce and Osborne and another gentleman. And it was just kind of, one of those fun nights where it's like, where are we going next? What are we doing next? Why don't we all head back to our apartment? They head back to their apartment thinking it's just kind of a continuation of the party. And it turned into absolute tragedy and nightmare.
From Becky Ireland, first a question from me, Allie. When you see these photos, I know you can see the pictures, at least I think you can. By the way, I always thought that was David's hand, but that's her hand there. But what's your, even in the darkest times and stories, we try to get a little humor in here, but what's your visceral feeling when you see a picture of him and knowing what he's now accused of?
I mean, I've seen pictures similar to this before, before any of this happened or took place. And, he's had pictures with Paris Hilton and all sorts of celebrities. And so these pictures make me sad just because I know what the outcome is. But I've seen so much of this on the internet and in articles and, shows online, like you mentioned, 48 hours. And so I guess at first it was much harder to see these pictures, but I think as time goes on, it's not as hard because as we just unfortunately get used to things that are challenging and hard, it becomes less hard.
What
but
do you
not
think
painful.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
I was going to ask you, what do you think your brother would say to you if he knew you were speaking to us? We get about between 2 and 3 million views and downloads a month, so it's a substantial reach. We're not the nightly news, obviously, which is dying anyway. But what do you think he'd say to you if he knew you were doing this?
Oh, I'm sure he called me a fucking. Oh, sorry, I don't know.
You could say it. You could say it.
I think he would definitely call me a fucking bitch and just probably tell me how much he hates me and wants, would never speak to me again. But at this point, I don't care what he thinks of me. I don't care what he thinks about what I'm doing. He lost that privilege a long time ago, and I never want to see him again. I never want to speak to him again. I mean, when Josh made a comment about how he would be saying some things that are really hard for me to hear, I really don't think you could say anything at this point that would be hard to hear. I've read all the, articles online. I've read all, I've watched the documentaries. At this point, I despise him with every bone in my body more than, I don't think I feel that way about anybody in my entire life other than him. So I don't think anyone could say anything to me at this point that I would, haven't heard or that I don't agree with. I really think he's a horrible, horrible, disgusting monster. And so I don't care what he thinks of me doing this or saying these things because, he lost that. He's lost that opportunity with me for me to care what he thinks at this point. So he did this to himself. And, Josh, you made a really good point. He has been doing things like this for as long as I can remember, at least in his 20s and 30s. And now he's, turned 40 in jail. But, I know that he's manipulated women. I didn't know to this extent. I didn't know the things that he was capable of, but I knew that he was a liar and that he told people things that they wanted to hear so he could get what he wanted. I know that he, probably used women. I didn't know that he would take it this far, but I knew that he wasn't a good person and that he did bad things, but I didn't have any idea that it was to this extent.
Nina Hobson, a former UK detective, a bodyguard, and just an all-around great woman who actually spends time. I mean, one of her sort of passions is working on sex crimes and sex trafficking. But Nina, to you, Christy Giles was left at Southern California Hospital in Culver City. Literally, they ran out, presumably David Pearce and Brand Osborne, and literally just dumped her onto a sidewalk there by the ER. And then Kaiser Permanente was the other one. That's where Cabrales was left at a Kaiser Permanente in West Los Angeles. Now, she was actually in a coma for 11 days, which is almost worse, I think, before dying of organ failure and cocaine intoxication. Now, the guys, again, as I said earlier, they were masked without license plates. What do you make, of this behavior other than it's incredibly irresponsible? It seems predatory in nature, and just outright, horrific, especially if you're a victim or a victim's family member or a family member of the person who's doing this stuff.
Right. If you find somebody who needs medical help, whether I know there's been an explanation by the side of the road, who goes and takes the plates off the car, who goes and puts masks on, who doesn't provide a contact detail so that should the inevitable tragedy happen that you're not contactable by the police who want to know. Nobody unless they're guilty, and nobody unless they're wanting to run away from what they have done. And that's as simple as that. If somebody can give me another explanation how or why a person, a human being, is dropped at a hospital in such a medical state and you drive away, please do, because there isn't one other than you're guilty of a crime. Maybe you've panicked, maybe you think there's a chance, but you are guilty of what these guys are being accused of, as far as I'm concerned. And please, somebody prove me otherwise.
From Neely here, Allie, to you, what kind of child was your brother? Going back to kind of the Freudian issues here of, the psychotherapy stuff about the childhood, but was he always in trouble as a kid? And someone else, just to couple it with the other question, wanted to know if has perpetually sort of had drug problems.
Okay, I'll start with the kind of child my brother was. He always had a lot of energy. I know he was diagnosed with ADHD as a young kid, and my parents put him in soccer, and actually they even put him in acting classes. He performed in Bethesda, we grew up at an academy. It's called BAPA, Bethesda, BAPA, Bethesda Academy of Performing Arts. So he was actually always into kind of this acting mode. But in terms of getting in trouble, yes, he did. He was always tried to get away with it, though. And that's the thing. I think that he's always somehow or another been able to get away with things. he got expelled from high school for selling marijuana in class. Very intelligent, but and he got expelled, and my parents sent him to like a private boarding school. But he would sneak out of the house. They would ground him. He wouldn't listen. So he was very rebellious as a younger kid, and definitely got in trouble, but almost ignored it then too.
Yeah. How was your mother you talked about your mother's unconditional love. How was your dad's relationship with David, earlier on in life, heading into the 20s and 30s?
They would have a relationship that would be on and off. I think they were also very similar in some ways. Sorry, in some ways. My dad was a dentist. He worked really hard. He worked up until the day he passed away. So he had a very different work ethic than my brother. My dad had a lot more morals than my brother ever did. But I also felt like my dad often allowed my brother to get away with things. Sometimes my mom would ground my brother, my dad would unground him. And so I feel like my dad almost started some of this perpetual feeling my brother where he could get away with things. And so when my brother was older, they had a good relationship at times. And I think my dad really liked my brother's flashy lifestyle. But then my brother and my dad would get into a fight, and my brother wouldn't talk to my dad for several years at a time. And my brother was very close with Ron Jeremy for a while. And at one point, I think my brother wanted to be a jerk to my dad and told my dad that Ron Jeremy was his new father, which I was disgusted by. But
there he is with Ron Jeremy. For those who do not know, Ron Jeremy is a infamous porn star who is also brought up on multiple charges of R-ing women. And there he is with David Pearce from 2019. By the way, Josh, I don't know if you know, because I don't think you keep up on all the Ron Jeremy news, but he was facing life in prison. Do we know whatever happened with all those charges? He had some sort of mental decline and sort of fell apart.
Yeah, last I heard, he fell out of competency. His mental health had gone into such decline that he's now in a mental health facility. So he's not released, but his case is on hiatus while they try to restore his mental health. But I think it's a deterioration of his mind rather than some sort of illness, and I think he'll probably remain there.
Yeah. Allie, this is interesting. So the picture on the right, this is your brother's desk in his apartment. Now, keep in mind, everybody, he was portraying himself as this Hollywood mogul, talent manager, a record executive, or a music executive. Was he like this in terms of how do you interpret this desk? It's, to me, sort of insane looking, obviously very disorganized, and kind of like almost like a hoarding mentality.
It actually doesn't surprise me that. I mean, it's disgusting. It's horrifying, but it kind of reminds me of my brother. I feel like there are times where I feel like my brother was manic and all over the place. And I mentioned the some hyperness in him. So I felt like he was always moving from thing to thing and never really concentrated on one thing at a time. And he was never really neat. He was never really messy. Like, seeing this is kind of horrifying, like I said. But now that I take a second, it doesn't really surprise me, because it kind of reminds me of the kind of person that he is, just kind of all over the place and kind of a mess.
Was he ever formally diagnosed? I mean, I know you said he maybe had trouble, sitting still, so maybe it was ADHD, but did he ever have a formal diagnosis from a psychiatrist?
With ADHD, yes. And I believe depression and anxiety, but that's it.
Okay.
I mean, I say that's it, but I feel like there could be more. But.
And I think I can say this. Yesterday when we spoke, you said you believe he is a true narcissist. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So Nina, you're an investigator. You've seen the worst of the worst. Just from a kind of an investigative standpoint, you walk into a person's home that you're doing an investigation on, and you see this desk here. What runs through your head as an investigator? How are you interpreting all this?
Well, you've also already got an understanding of how he portrays himself prior to seeing that desk. So we know that he's portraying himself to be this great guy in Hollywood, this movie record, blah, blah, blah kind of guy. You walk in and see that, and that immediately tells you that something's not right. Now that desk, and I can't see it as well as I would like to, but that's a starting point potentially of us finding out who's done what on that night. So everything has to be looked at. Everything has to be secured, because there's one thing on that desk that could give us the clue that means that we know how these young, beautiful ladies died. So everything has to be treated very carefully. But when you do walk in there, and it's actually a scene that I've seen several times on several cases where you don't expect it to be like that, because you've seen the pictures with the celebrities and, he's portrayed this lifestyle. And that's all you know at that point until you walk through that door. So that is a scene of crime that has to be examined very, very carefully, from what's on the desk to what residue may be on the desk to what's on the computers.
And Nina, he was diagnosed, or they believed to have, as you just heard from Ali, depression, anxiety, narcissism, maybe ADHD. It sounds like. Are these the diagnoses of, obviously not everyone with ADHD or depression or anxiety. I mean, I suffer from anxiety, but kind of the combination of all these diagnoses. Do you think that's sort of what built up to this behavior?
Well, I'm not a medical profession, and I don't want to make comment on that. Obviously, some people have depression and anxiety and ADHD, and they have a very normal, very pleasant relationship with whoever they choose to have one with. So is it potentially a reason, an excuse? Maybe, but I think that's probably what it would be. But it's not something that we haven't seen many, many times in people who are accused of these kind of crimes. But I'm not saying that's the reason he's standing charge right now.
From Neely again, Joshua. Why does he's not the boyfriend, he's actually the husband of this woman, Christy Giles. You see him there on the right. I'm not sure if I read this right, Josh, that maybe he's from Australia.
South Africa.
South Africa. Apologies to Aussies and South Africans for mixing up the accent. And by the way, COE, if you happen to, the timing is horrible because Carm is going to pick up some stuff at my house, so the COE is probably distracted. But if you happen to have sound from the trial, I'd love to play that. So Josh, why do you need to represent him? Let's start there. And it's interesting, you talked about this, obviously, that she was not this big partier, but my first thought is she's young. She's like 24. She's out at a rave. She's going back to a guy's house, and I'm in no way trying to victim shame. I was kind of like surprised then to read and find out that she was married. I mean, I assume their relationship was in a good state. If you can maybe speak to that and why you are representing him.
Yeah, thank you for asking the question, Neely, because I probably should have clarified that before. And you're right, Joel. I should shed a little light on why she was out that evening. But I was contacted by Jan soon after Christy's death. He was out of town when this all took place. He has in no way ever been implicated, but he, is now finds himself caught up in this situation where his wife is dead. The police are investigating. There's a person that he has no idea who he is, that she was allegedly at this man's house beforehand. Initially, in fact, it was an unsolved crime. They were trying to figure out who it was that dropped them off, because as Nina pointed out, they were dropped off in unmarked vehicles by men wearing masks. And he was just beside himself with kind of both you know, the sadness of having lost his life or wife, and then also just being, you know, trying to navigate the waters of the LAPD system and what was going on. And he just felt like he needed someone to kind of help him out and be a helping hand. And so that's what I've been, is a really just kind of a victim's advocate and liaison for him between law enforcement and the DA's office, and just helping guide him through this whole horrible process. As far as why they were out that evening, again, there was no indication that she was interested in pursuing other men or anything like that. You know, again, the way I describe it is they were young, they were out having fun. This is kind of the, you know, the lifestyle of young folks here in Los Angeles, that you go out and you meet people, and maybe that party heads to another party and everybody's just having a good time. She was out with a friend of hers, so there was some feeling of a little bit of safety and security there. They had each other. She wasn't all alone. They were in communication with each other. And in fact, during the investigation, they realized that at some point they wanted to leave, and they actually called an Uber, and an Uber vehicle arrived to the residence. No one responded, and then the Uber canceled the call and left. And there's text message exchanges between Christy and Hilda where they talk about leaving. So they were, in their view, this was just one of those kind of crazy evenings that they probably would have laughed about the next day if it hadn't turned so very sinister and dark.
Allie, another question from Nikki Cudd. She's on fire tonight. She wanted to know, you know, obviously in a hypothetical world, if you could teleport yourself into Los Angeles, into his holding cell, what would you want to say to him?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, that's a good question. It's a question that I've been, you know, kind of fighting with internally for a while, because I feel like it would help me to say something to him, even though I don't believe he's ready to hear it. And I don't even know if it would matter to him.
Do you think he feels guilt or remorse?
It doesn't seem like it from what I hear from my mom.
Do you think he's sitting in the holding cell in jail saying, why me? Like, instead, in other words, victimizing himself?
I don't think he's giving it very much thought. I think he just, I mean, I guess he doesn't really have much else to do, but, and I don't know that for sure. I mean, it's been so long, and I've never talked to him since any of this has gone on. So, but from when I do ask my mom questions, and she's really the only family member that does speak to him. And at one point she was speaking to him daily, and he had his, I think he has a phone, like not a cell phone, but like a wall phone in his jail cell, which I think is wrong. But so he calls her constantly, and it doesn't sound like he has any remorse whatsoever or feels, and maybe it's a why me. She's never mentioned that. I don't think they talk about it much because the phones are, you know, clearly it's a jail phone, and I think she's worried about him saying anything that would implicate him. I mean, in terms of what I would say to him is I would tell him how much pain he's caused my family and me, and how much I really despise him as a human being, and how, you know, I would never forgive him.
Family dynamics are complicated. All you have to do is sit around the Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa table, and I think you know, it's talked about every year that it can be a tough time of year. But Josh, real quick, so I want to get to Nina from Buttercup 203. What about toxicology? Were any tests done on David or Brant Osborne? And we're about to get to another guy named Michael Ansbach, but were they ever tested? Were they doing all the same drugs? And it's interesting that they're alive, but these women are not.
Well, to answer the first question, no, they were not tested because they weren't even identified as suspects until days later. They didn't know who had dropped them off. And so, and by the time they had finally located their suspects, they had gone through great efforts to cover up and dispose of and clean up that house. So a lot of the evidence the police might have been able to recover was long gone. But there was evidence from Ansbach, who has now, like you said, flipped and is cooperating, and other statements that were taken by police that everyone was kind of doing drugs that evening. But you're right, no one suffered the effects that these two girls did. I mean, this is, they were taking things like cocaine, which is supposed to have the effect of keeping you up and active. And instead they are in a near comatose, barely conscious state for several hours. There's a witness a next door neighbor who heard the moaning of a woman for hours. So it looks like they were in very dire straits for a long period of time. And that's not what you get from ingesting these types of party drugs that they were allegedly taking that evening. And one thing I wanted to point out too, as far as why I think the DA's office made the decision to file this as a murder the way they did, is that in those crucial moments when these girls likely could have had their lives saved, when they were at their most desperate and they could have been rushed to the hospital and perhaps something could have been done to save their lives, these men were scrambling to cover it up, and they were thinking only about their own self-preservation and about how don't they get caught and how do they clean this all up and what should we do and how should we, quote unquote, dispose of them. And the removing of license plates and, finding different hospitals to drop them off at. They were dropped off with, at an hour's period of time in between. All of this is precious, precious moments that could have saved their lives. And instead, in those moments, they were thinking only about themselves. And these two women ended up dead.
And I have no doubt he is still thinking about himself, because that's what a lot of these guys do. Carolina, thank you for this comment. I beg you to pay attention to this and do justice. Hilda is not in all the photos and all the headlines. Hilda was an excellent person. Like I said, she was an architect, top of her class. But look, this is also LA, and there's a very LA little twist that I'm about to tell you about here about one of the arrests. But you've got the model with a handsome South African husband. So yeah, I mean, that's just the way, sadly, the media world works, that they're going to probably show Christy more than Hilda, but we obviously need to remember both of them, plus the 7 women who are allegedly victims of David as well. They're out there and probably suffering. But Nina, I think probably the most important question is what I'm going to ask you right now. This community is overwhelmingly female, 82%. A lot of them are not in kind of the rave stage of life, but there are a lot of, there's sadly a lot of predators out there. What is like kind of your singular piece of advice to women, whether they're meeting someone on a dating app, whether they're going to a rave party, whether they're just striking up a conversation in a Starbucks? How do you protect yourself against these sorts of people? The vast majority of people are good, but there are definitely predators among us.
Yeah, there definitely are, and it seems a lot more so in LA than other parts of the world that I've lived in, because it gives opportunity because of the Hollywood LA lifestyle. And people come to, it's a known fact, they come to Hollywood or they come to LA to make it in this world of fame and movies and music. And that allows a predator to be easily a predator, because you have pictures, and we've mentioned David had pictures with famous people. You show one person that, and they suddenly think that, they're in that lifestyle that they actually want to be in. And I think the thing that we have to do as women, and not just women, because women do it to men too, but when we're meeting somebody new, just double check yourself and make sure that you're asking the questions, or if there's, go with your gut feeling. And, a lot of times we don't go with our gut feeling because we look at the other thing that's being offered to us or being shown to us. But gut is a really good thing. And any time that there's any, frightened or anything at all. We looked at the text message that the girls sent. Now, we don't have the privilege of finding out what that was all about or why that didn't happen. But it appears that there was some issues in that house at that time. Now, they've gone back as young girls, and I want to say, from what I know of the case, they weren't the party people that the media again portray, that these are girls who are out taking drugs every night. And we talked about the drugs and the fentanyl and the GHB, and those drugs are not the drugs that they were taking at the rave. And so it's about double checking how you feel and triple checking. And don't go to people's houses that you don't necessarily know. Work out, maybe there's a night, the next night you can check out this guy, see who he is, who he's related to. And that's easy, me sitting here saying that, because I've been young once and I have been out partying and I've done the same thing. And I'm on dating apps and I'm my worst enemy. I don't double check things sometimes. But I think that this environment allows for this to happen. So we as individuals need to take some real special care and double, so this doesn't happen again. And it will, sadly, it will, because predators will never go away and they'll always be part of society. And they're smart. They are smart.
By the way, I think her name is Jacqueline Ha in the chat, and she was saying she grew up in LA, and this is kind of a normal part of life. COE grew up in LA, and I'm not going to say that she never didn't party, but they like to party in LA. And it's part of I'm in Miami, kind of the same thing. I think that's kind of one of the things that is a byproduct of living in kind of big metropolitan areas. Carolina again. Please, I beg you to leave them in jail forever. You have no idea how much pain it has been for Hilda Marcel's family. She was a brilliant girl with academic awards and cum laude and with a big heart. Carolina, same as I did with Allie, you're obviously on the victim side of this in the sense that she's no longer with us, but please pass along our condolences to her family. And if they need a platform, they've got a platform with me, Surviving the Survivor @gmail.com. This I did not know. I did know Christy was 24, Hilda 26, but I did not know Hilda died the day before her 27th birthday. That's so sad. She was in that coma for 11 days. Nina, I don't know if you have to jump. Obviously, we love having you, but you're like 2 minutes from the top of the hour. So
I'll give you 5 minutes more.
That means I got to get another question. But Josh Ritter, to you. The charges here for for David Pearce, murder, 7 counts of the R word, accused of providing fentanyl-laced drugs and failing to seek medical help, allegedly drugged and R'd women across Los Angeles for nearly 2 decades. And then the other defendant, Brant Osborne, charged with 2 counts of accessory after the fact for allegedly helping Pearce destroy evidence. Let's start with David. What are we looking at realistically if convicted here? It's murder and the 7 counts of the R word. Is he facing life in prison here?
Oh, absolutely. The 7 counts of sex-based assault charges carry 15 to life for each, and in California they can run those consecutively. So you can go ahead and do the math on all of that. And then the murder counts obviously are life counts as well. Probably you're looking in the range of 25 to life for each of those. So yeah, this is a life case. This is a case that sends somebody away definitely for the rest of their life. As far as Brant Osborne goes, he's very positioned very differently. He is being charged with accessory after the fact. The exposure on that is much less. It's about 3 years per count. It's a little strange to me that they actually are trying them together. I think part of the reasoning for that is that they obviously he was an accomplice to all of this. He was, speaking of Osborne, was an accomplice to all of this. They don't believe that they have evidence that he knew what Pearce was doing. with the girls beforehand, that he wasn't the one supplying them or wasn't the one attempting to participate in some sort of assault of them. But it's curious to me that he hasn't accepted some sort of plea or cooperation agreement before now, because he's, you know, sitting in court next to somebody who's charged with about as serious stuff as you can be charged with.
Here's the little LA twist. So Brandt, Brandt Osborne, Osborn, again, charged with 2 counts of accessory after the fact for helping Pearce destroy evidence. He was arrested, of all places. This guy was a part-time actor. He was Pearce's roommate. He was arrested on the set of NCIS, later released on a $40,000 bail. Just very LA in nature to arrest him there. But Nina, my final question for you, because I know you have to run, and then we'll dig in some more with Allie and Josh. But when you arrest these types of perps, it's got to be a great feeling. But when you bring them into the interview room, is it challenging because of their narcissism, because of the fact that they're the kind of guys that can sell themselves as something that they're not? Again, he telling these women he's a music mogul, a talent manager, all these things that are sort of almost like LA cliches, but we do see it happen in reality. But the bottom line question, once you get them in handcuffs, you get them in the interview room, are they tough interviews?
Oh, absolutely they are, because they manipulate. That's what they do well. They lie. That's what they do well. That's why they're getting the women to come to their house, because they're very convincing. And as an investigator, you have to see through that, but work with the evidence that you have. And when you take somebody into that interview room, you believe as a detective that you have the right person. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sat there. But then you have to go through their story, and you have to cross-examine their story. And they're very good at lying. And they often don't have remorse. And we spoke about that. I don't believe that these gentlemen have remorse at all right now. Otherwise, why are we even going to trial? You know, when somebody pleads guilty, sometimes there's an element of remorse there, and that might contribute. But yeah, very, very difficult people to interview. And bear in mind, as detectives, we are still human beings, and we still do have the same feelings that you would possess if you were sat opposite over the desk of somebody who has been accused of these absolutely horrendous crimes. And we have to take that out of the situation as well. So a very, very difficult thing to do, and credit to all the detectives who are doing that.
Credit to Nina Hobson, a former UK detective. She's investigated homicides, R's, SAs, you name it. She's done it. Nina, you and I need to talk offline, which we'll find time to do, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And Ali, thank you so much for being part of this conversation.
Thank you for your kind words earlier, Nina.
I'll talk to you all guys soon. All
right. Take care, everybody. Sorry to hear this. It sounds like Rachel D had a issue with her fur family member. I hate to say this, but it is among the worst things. I went through it a few times in my life. So condolences on that, if in fact your fur baby has crossed the proverbial rainbow bridge. So now it's Allie and Josh. So Allie, some interesting questions that came up earlier that I just jotted notes. How is he making a living? Obviously, I assume your dad was fairly well off, being a dentist, literally till the day he passed away. Were your parents helping to support him? Was he working part-time jobs? He obviously wasn't any kind of music mogul or talent manager, as far as we know.
So he was a club promoter. He did get paid for that. He would book, I don't want to say how, I don't know how famous, but he would book clients at Vegas nightclubs or LA nightclubs and set up their, the contracts and negotiate, and he would get get paid for that. So he would make some money as a club promoter. But I did find out very shortly before my father passed away that my brother sold cocaine a lot and made money doing so. And I also know recently he's well, I know he's still gambling, like
Mm.
mostly sports, but and I don't know how, and that's not my business, but that's something that he's been doing for a long time.
So he's got a few vices, selling drugs, gambling, those types of things. By the way, I did not mention off the top, so Josh needs to berate me for that. But Miss Jessica here, Josh's channel, Courtroom Confidential, is blowing up. Phenomenal channel. So please subscribe. Please check it out. You will not be disappointed. And then here, Josh is also featured in the 48 Hours episode. You can just Google David Pearce, Pearce, and I'm sure it'll lead you right to it. CBS has a lot of reporting on this. Rachel D, thank you for that. So, Josh, the third person who was involved but ultimately kind of turned state's witness and was not charged is this guy, Michael Ansbach. He is a key, obviously, prosecution witness, and he's going to testify about the actions of that day and also the delays in seeking medical help. It's obviously going to be incredibly incriminating. Is it a problem, though, when you've got a guy who's part of this kind of crew who's now your star witness? I mean, in terms of credibility?
I think the defense will try to make it a problem. But I think in this instance, it won't really end up being that way. I think that Ansbach presents himself as somebody who did not sign up for this. You know what I mean? He I think was just looking to do what everybody else thought they were doing, just having a good night and going out and having some drinks and meeting some people and having a good time. And it turned, really ugly really quickly. And I think he immediately realized how bad it was and then therefore cooperated with police. And I think he will be a pivotal witness in this whole thing because there are large gaps in time, even though the investigators have done a tremendous job of trying to put together a timeline almost to the minute of where everyone was and what was happening. There are gaps that can only be filled in by Ansbach, and he'll I think do a really admirable job of filling that in for the jurors. But, of course, as you pointed out, when he gets up and they cross-examine him, it's going to kind of be, well, you were there too. And, it may even be worse than that. It may even be, weren't you the one who was providing them with the narcotics? And weren't you the one who was trying to, have sex with these women or something along those lines? But with Pearce's history, I think a lot of that's going to fall on deaf ears. I mean, you have a person who, like I said, has left a trail of women that he has assaulted. And these assaults are not, I don't know how to describe this. They are not even a close call as far as were these violent R words or not. These are forcible. These are women who are saying they are begging him to stop. These are women who have been drugged, really, really awful stuff. And it happened again and again and again. It's thank God he finally has been stopped. It's just incredibly unfortunate that it had to take the death of these two women to actually make it stop.
I mean, it's so sad when you think about it, because this young architect, the young model, I mean, literally had everything going for them and then just cut short. My dad used to say life turns on a dime, and it definitely does. Allie, to you, what's your earliest memory, like family memory with your brother? And we kind of talked about this earlier, but were there indications like when he was super young? I'm talking like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Indications of him being what? Tell me.
Having issues, being problematic, being a chronic liar and a narcissist. I mean, were there signs of this potentially early on? Like, was you told me that you'd be next to him and he'd literally just be completely lying to whoever he was talking about where he was.
Yeah, that was mostly in his like early 20s and even as in late teens. But so as a child, no, I would say no. There were very small signs, but again, I don't know if I could really correlate that to what we're seeing now. But I mean, he would lie then. He was sneaky. He was always trying to show off as a kid, but I mean, these were more like somewhat typical things I think that you somewhat see in kids. I mean, kids don't always tell the truth. Sometimes they want to, be sneaky and sneak out of the house or do something sneaky or sneak downstairs and watch something that they're not supposed to watch. But out of the norm, no, not really.
And are you watching the trial?
I wish I could. I mean, I watched everything I could on court TV as the opening statements. I mean, I have a million questions for Josh. I don't know if you're able to go to the trial.
Allie, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Are you at the trial every day?
I have not been at the trial every day. No.
Okay. Have you been there recently?
I have not. No.
Oh, okay. Because I'm just curious on where they are in the trial. I do wish I could sit in and just hear what has been saying, what he's, and what he says in his defense and what these women are really saying. Because a lot of what I hear is just kind of secondhand from my mom. And I'm sure it's kind of sugar-coated from my brother as well. So, but I do live pretty far from LA, live in the Bay Area. And so it's not easy for me to get there. And I guess there's a part of me that doesn't want to, like I said, show any support for him whatsoever. But I am curious on where they are in the trial and what's been happening. So no, I wish the trial was being televised, but since they're only doing the opening and closing remarks, that's all I've been able to, see what they've shown.
And what other questions for Josh? I don't have to put you on the spot right this second, but feel free to jump in. Do you have another one?
I was going to ask him what another person mentioned that, why does Jan have an attorney? But you answered that. And I guess what are the next steps, or what kind of how do I say this? What can be benefited, or I guess how can the families make peace and benefit from this other than seeing him behind bars?
God, I don't know if there's any, we toss that word about closure around a lot, and we talk about, people seeking justice a lot, but you lose someone like this, and both of these women sound like they were just absolute beacons of light and full of life, and just people you would want to know and hang out with, and to lose people like that, I don't know if you ever recover from it. I know that Jan personally has made it kind of his mission to just make sure to have her memory out there, to make sure that people know she was just, much more than just what she's been described as a aspiring model. And that, this is one of those things. I think the lesson they would all love people to come away with is that this is one of those things that really can happen to anyone. You have two girls who were together. They felt safe. They had intentions of being safe. They were out for a night of fun. And, even trying to protect themselves and trying to do the right thing and trying to even remove themselves from the situation, they still fell victim to somebody who, like I said, I've described as a predator. I think that's what he is. And it's unfortunate. I think one of the things that we're going to have to talk about, the fallout after all of this, is why did it take this many people and the death of two women before somebody like this was stopped?
I agree. I also know that he was brought up on charges on 2 different occasions way before any of this happened, and both of those cases got dropped because of a lack of evidence, I think.
Yeah. It's an unfortunate thing. One of the most difficult types of cases to file when you're a prosecutor are these types of cases, because by their nature, they are not committed with a bunch of eyewitnesses. And it usually ends up being one person's word against another. And a woman, wakes up the next day and says something happened to me, and that man can easily deny it. And with a lack of, oftentimes there's a lack of physical evidence or other evidence to corroborate anything. And it's difficult for these for the DA's office to even bring these charges in the first place. And then when they do bring them, lots of times these women, and I don't fault them at all, but they don't want to be re-victimized by being put on the stand and cross-examined. That's a very difficult thing to go through with. And they don't want to traumatize themselves by that. So you see a lot of these cases that don't get prosecuted properly. But I praise the women who have agreed to come forward now. And that's what's going to happen at this trial. Is it's going to take a long time because you're going to have to hear from all 7 of these women talk about the horrible experience that each of them have experienced. I mean, you're not just talking a murder trial here. It's like a murder trial on top of 7 other trials dealing with allegations of sexual assault.
Mm.
And I'm sure there's more out there as well.
Oh, there's no doubt. I have no doubt that there's definitely more out there. Again, Nikki Cuds with a great question here. Knowing your brother and, you guys were born of the same mother, how do you think he's going to do if convicted? And now he's got to spend life in prison where he's in a small cell, told what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And, and is going to be amongst some unsavory characters.
Gosh. Part of me doesn't care, and hopes that, he gets what he deserves. But he's also a very social person. When we were young, he would make friends with the random strangers and other little kids when we were on vacation. And I know since he's been in LA County, he has made some friends or, acquaintances while there. And anytime he feels like something is done to him unjust, whether they've removed his telephone or the TV broke, he has asked my mom to call the warden to try to remedy the situation. Because he seems to think he's at a Hilton hotel sometimes. So I don't think he'll do well, because I also think once he is sentenced, it's going to be a lot different situation. He doesn't have a roommate right now. He's by himself. He spends most of the time by himself. So he doesn't have too many interactions with people. And I think he has made, acquaintances while there and gotten some people, on his side in a sense, or, however you want to say that. But
are
I don't
you
think he'll do well.
Yeah. Are you, she said she doesn't think he's going to do well. Are you upset that your mom is going to go support him? Does that bother you?
I understand why, but yes, it does.
So back to these 7 women, I just want to write down a note for myself that I had earlier for Josh, which I just did. I just wrote it down. So again, these 7 other women come into play between the years 2007 to 2020. So it goes on well over a decade. The victims, these victims reported blacking out after being served drinks and waking up to find Pearce S.A.ing them. In one instance, he forced the victim to then apologize to his roommate, Brant Osborne, for quote unquote being too loud, which is just a sickening thought. So he is R-ing this woman and then basically dressing her down in front of this roommate saying she was too loud, please apologize, which is pretty depraved, if I can use that word. And he then also went on to threaten to harm victims' families. Hearing that, Allie, does that just kind of crush you, like where you're like, this is just next level depravity?
I just think he's a disgusting human being. It makes me very sad inside that I could that I'm related to somebody who could just be such a horrible, disgusting, just manipulative, just no values, no dignity, no care for the human life. Yes, it just everything I hear and the things I heard the bribing part too recently. I didn't know that. it's just disgusting. And I don't even know how someone even capable of that. And it's very painful.
Jimmy McNutty is actually watching the show tonight. Thanks, Jimmy, because we're talking about a trial. He's very specific. I'm not going to poke fun at him or give him a hard time, but he can be a little flippant at times. And here he's saying it's a he said, she said case. Josh, I don't think that's necessarily the case here. I mean, there seems to be more evidence and much more of a history. Is Jimmy right or is he wrong in this instance?
Well, I think Jimmy's point is that that's why these types of cases, the nature of them, are so difficult when you have one victim. I mean, it's rare to see a case involving these types of crimes brought with just one victim in one instance, because it comes down to, as Jimmy described, kind of a he said, she said sort of thing. And it's difficult for jurors to try to parse out the truth when you're lacking any kind of other corroborating evidence. There's usually not going to be videotape. There's usually not going to be a bunch of forensic evidence. There's usually not going to be, some sort of eyewitness to what took place. So it does come down to just kind of a believability call for the jurors. And those are difficult cases and oftentimes not brought. So it usually is that you'll see multiple victims in these types of cases brought, and that's why they begin to cross corroborate each other. And in a case like this, I think it's a tremendously strong case when you have 7 different women and really 8 and 9 victims. I mean, the eight Christy and Hilda, had they been lucky enough to survive, probably also would have been victims of this type of assault from him as well. I mean, that's absolutely where it looks like this was all headed. And that's why it's all being tried together, because this is all part of the same course and conduct of this individual.
Allie, this is a difficult question I'm about to ask, but I just thought about it. Do you think that it was in him to escalate, like that there was also some sort of maybe like a sexual thrill, a control thing? Do you think he would have escalated to actually killing women, not just kind of drugging them? Do you see that in him?
That's a great question. I mean, it's hard because, like I said, I really haven't had a relationship with him, or very little to no interaction with him for the last 10 to even 15 years. And so I want to say no, that I don't think I think that since the narcissistic in him and the egocentric person that he is, I think he liked the control, but I don't see him wanting to harm people physically. Like, he never was getting in fights. He never really hurt people. I mean, in terms of, physically, other than, I'm not saying other than I know that he hurt people in this situation and in many other situations, but in terms of getting in physical fights with people or hurting animals or anything like that, no, I never saw anything like that. And so I think it's more of a control thing and more of an ego thing, and just him thinking that he's better than everyone else, or better than these women. I actually don't feel like he's ever really had a long time serious girlfriend. And I don't really feel like he has I really never thought he had a lot of respect for women. So I almost feel like this is more of that and less of wanting to really physically cause pain.
Butterfly Lady, wonder if he partied with the 3 brothers from Florida. Those are the Alexander brothers who are sitting their ass in a detention center in Miami. They were just denied bail, despite offering $100 million plus per brother. They were committing allegedly some of the most heinous, hideous crimes, very similar to these crimes, and preying on women all the way back to high school here in Miami. And I think they've got their comeuppance coming to them. Very quick, just a programming note. Tomorrow, Phil and Scott are joining at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. We are going to talk Kohberger. Phil likes to call him the evildoer. There's quite a bit of information that's been kind of coming out, so we're going to do a catching up on Kohberger's show. Brian Kohberger, of course, accused and going to stand trial for the murder of 4 University of Idaho students who are young, not even in the prime of their life yet. And if you appreciate the content and the bravery of Allie and getting this kind of perspective, please support the channel. Please hit like. Please subscribe. We have a Patreon page. The COE tries to keep that up and running and puts in court documents. And lastly, tomorrow morning, 10:30 Eastern, we're working to find out if there's going to be a stream of this. We're going to take it live. If there is, I am doing, it's kind of funny. There's a podcast. I don't even know the name. It's basically about old people, geriatrics. And so they asked Carm to come on with me. So we're doing that tomorrow morning. But at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, Mickey Steins, the Kentucky sheriff accused of shooting his former judge friend in his chamber, he's going to be in court for another hearing. And again, we will try to take that live. Josh, to you, in these cases, obviously, my assumption is that female jurors, and I got to tell you, I don't know the jury makeup here. I should, but I don't. You got to think that the female jurors are going to lean in favor of a conviction. How do male jurors generally react in these sorts of cases?
You know, you'd be surprised. Many times the male jurors are so disgusted kind of by the behavior and want to kind of send the message that they don't condone this type of behavior at all, that sometimes they can be some of your stronger jurors. I understand kind of the thinking that there might be a split based upon gender, but you know, in a case like this isn't some sort of close call where there may have been misread signals from someone, or how could he possibly have he may have misunderstood her intentions or something along those lines, where you could see some sort of argument being made and people maybe falling into different camps as far as how they interpret the interactions between men and women. These are clear-cut cases of assault. I mean, we're talking force. We're talking against people's consent and will. We're talking the use of drugs. And we're talking, then the taking of someone's life. And while that person is clinging to their last breaths, just running around trying to protect yourself in those moments that could have been moments to save those people's lives. I don't think there's anyone, male or female, who's really going to sympathize with much of that behavior.
Josh, Lee T here wants to know, his name is Jeff Voll, I believe, Voll, the defense attorney. Do you know anything about him?
I don't. Yeah, I watched some of the opening. I don't even recognize him.
Yeah. And by the way, it was just, as far as I know, just the openings have been streamed, but I assume, Josh, that they're not airing the trial because of these 7 I don't know if all 7 are testifying. You said they were. I thought it was 5. I could definitely be wrong. But is that the reason they're probably not taking this live or allowing it to be streamed, because they want to keep these people protected?
Yeah. California, it's up to the judge. If the parties are objecting or agreeing to it, that'll weigh in the judge's decision making. But usually in these types of cases, with as sensitive as they are, they would need to go to great lengths to hide the identities of these victims when they did testify. And I think the judge just probably felt, given that you have so many who are going to testify, there's just no way to do that safely and with respect to what they've gone through. And so they felt it was better not to televise it, which is unfortunate, because I think it's an important case, and I think a case that people are interested in and want to see justice done. But I also completely understand wanting to give the people who are brave enough to come forward and testify as much kind of protection as they possibly can be afforded.
So David Pearce did have R charges against him dropped back in 2014. So that's about 11 years ago. He had been accused of R-ing a woman back then. Again, the charges were never filed. A couple more things I got to get through, and then we'll get final thoughts from Allie, who is the brother of this defendant, David Pearce. Josh Ritter, former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, and host of Courtroom Confidential. This is very chilling, Allie. evidence is being presented by the government. This guy Ansbach, who is kind of the third wheel, who has turned state's witness, he is testifying or going to testify that he overheard your brother tell the roommate, Brant Osborne, and I quote here, "Dead girls don't talk." That's very chilling. I'm sure you've heard it. When you heard that the first time, what was your reaction to that?
I think I cried. It's very hard, some of this stuff is very hard for me to put in words how I'm feeling. And I had all these big emotions when all this first happened. And then, this case dragged on, and it's been 3 years. So, now it's kind of coming back up. And when I heard that, it shook me from inside out. I just couldn't imagine anyone saying that. It's just heartbreaking. These girls had a full life ahead of them. And if I could change things and make it so we could reverse the situation, I would in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Joel's tired. He means sister. I think I just called you David's brother, so I apologize.
Okay.
He's your brother, so my apologies. Some other evidence, Josh. Police find $30,000 cash and a passport in the car that he was driving when he was arrested. That combined with searching for non-extradition countries like our friend Donna Adelson. I mean, between the testimony of Dead Girls Don't Talk, searching extradition countries, and having a passport and $30,000. I mean, I am, if I'm a juror, I'm opening my eyes wide open at that and saying this guy was definitely trying to flee and therefore is probably guilty of these crimes.
He was definitely trying to flee.
Yeah, the investigation unfolded in such a way that I think he became aware that he was the prime suspect before he was actually arrested, and it looks like he was taking that opportunity to probably figure out a way to leave the country or get himself away from, escape being arrested. And that will certainly play a role in the trial as well as far as it plays into consciousness of guilt.
So finally, the defense here, this guy, Jeff Voll, Voll, his defense is basically going to be that the victims used ketamine and coke at this rave that we talked about earlier. One of the victims had a hollowed out locket, and he's saying that the drugs were being kept in there. They may have even been their own. And then he's going to go on to say that there's no conclusive evidence that David Pearce provided the actual fatal drugs. Brant's defense, the roommate, is going to be that he's unaware the women were even drugged, which is kind of laughable. And then he went to sleep after the rave and wasn't even involved. They're both kind of pathetic defenses, Josh, but Brant, while you say David Pearce could see life here, Brant, what are you expecting? How much time is this guy going to serve if convicted?
He'll serve several years prison. It won't be anything close to the exposure that Pearce is looking at. Again, I think that the DA's office was showing some discretion and not trying to overcharge Osborne for the way that he was involved. I think they kept their eyes on the prize and realizing that the real driving force behind this assault was Pearce, and also given his history. But they also realized that there's a lot of criminal culpability in answering for his involvement that Osborne needs to do. Again, it's curious to me that there wasn't some sort of plea arrangement worked out ahead of time. I don't understand the how we ended up here, but it's very different cases between the two of these men.
Finally, back to Josh for this and a closing thought, and then I'm going to go to Allie to give her the floor to speak about whatever she wants to. Jan, your client, the husband of Christy Giles, the model, he spoke to a a British paper, and he's quoted as saying, "It's been over 3 years now since she died. That's a long time to be in limbo. I'm just pleased the trial is happening now. I'm hoping for a sense of closure, but who knows if that's something you ever really get." He admits that facing up to Pearce will be a shock to the system, and he has this desperation to demand why David Pearce, 40 at the time, allegedly left the girls to just die rather than calling an ambulance. He says it burns him deep inside. So, Josh, I assume your client is going to try to attend court,
Yeah.
or has attended court, and obviously you're there to kind of protect them, legally, but also on a moral level. But I guess, how's he doing? Do you know how Christy and Hilda's families are doing? And your final thoughts here?
I mean, they're devastated. There's a hole in their life now that will never be filled and never be repaired, but they also have all demonstrated themselves to be incredibly resilient people and trying to do the most they can to make this about preserving the memory of Christy and Hilda. I know more about Jan and Christy, obviously, from my involvement in it. And I know that Jan has really just spent, a large part of his time making sure to honor her memory and be there and support and speak to nearly any outlet that will ask him to tell the story of what happened and why he, wants a lesson to be learned from this and also justice to be done. But, it's one of those things where I said before, I don't, the idea of closure, the idea that there will be any kind of, feeling of comfort that comes out of this. It's hard to imagine when you've lost someone in your life like this in such a tragic way. And it's certainly in a way, as he highlights, that likely could have been prevented if someone had just simply made a phone call in those crucial moments. My final thoughts on this whole thing is that, it's one of those nightmare stories where, you tell people to be careful, you tell people to watch out, don't trust people, don't trust a drink that you're handed, always go out with friends. And yet still, I try to highlight this again and again, that they were not living high risk lifestyles. They were just out having fun. Two very bright, young women who had their entire futures ahead of them, and it was stolen from them by an absolute predator. I want to thank Allie. I appreciate you having the bravery to come on this show and speak tonight. And I appreciate you allowing me to kind of say some very strong things about a family member of yours. And I appreciate you being so understanding of that. And thank you, Joel and STS. You guys are always so great to me and my channel. And letting everybody know about what we're trying to do over on Courtroom Confidential. And if people are more curious about kind of the details of this, we did do an episode on this where we did a deep dive into all of the facts and circumstances and how this case unfolded and the investigation that went into it. It's a really tragic case, but also a fascinating case, and how they were able to solve this crime. Because, like I said, they had nothing to go on at first. There was a vehicle with no license plates, men who didn't identify themselves. They didn't even have photographs, and they just did some real old-fashioned, dogged police work until they were able to solve this case. And thank God they did.
Yeah. There's the link. It's in the chat. Josh Ritter's channel, Courtroom Confidential. Gets a lot of help from his wife, Tiff. So not unlike the COE and myself, and wishing them some good luck. They're both our COEs. By the way, please send our condolences to Jan and to both of the victims' families, although I know you're not in direct contact with them. Maybe Jan is. And post-trial, if Jan wants to come on, the platform is his. Maybe we can all reunite after the trial. Allie, I got to say, I really appreciate you being on here. Thought you were incredibly articulate. I hope you felt comfortable enough. I'm hoping you're okay with your decision to do it. I have two final questions, and I just want to leave the floor open to you. But If you could meet Christy and Hilda's families, what would you say to their parents?
It's actually I wanted to mention that. I actually really would like that opportunity. I did reach out to Jan because I wanted that opportunity, and that is also why, I'm here. Well, for many reasons, but
Well, we're going to stay on after the show,
okay.
and Josh will hopefully be able to connect you, but go ahead.
I just wanted to say how sorry I am, and just my deepest sorrow, pain, and suffering brother's caused, his actions have caused, and the lasting impact that it's will have on families and victims and all the loved ones affected. I don't know if I can even comprehend the depth of their loss or their pain that they're enduring. But honestly, my heart truly goes out to all of them. And it always will. I know I have no involvement in what happened other than being related to him, but I still carry a sense of like sorrow and guilt just by association. And it is very painful for me to know that someone I love or, has caused so much harm to so many people. And I want them to understand that I hope that there's justice for each person that has been hurt physically and emotionally by his actions.
I know obviously it's really hard. My final question is what do you sort of say to yourself? I'm sure you beat yourself up, which you should not be doing. But do you try to talk to yourself? Have you gone to I'm the son of a psychiatrist. I mean, have you gone to a therapist? Are you trying to work through it so you're not kind of shouldering all the burden?
When this all started, I started therapy, and she's wonderful. So yeah, I talk about it a lot. Yesterday I spoke with her for an hour and pretty much cried the entire time. Just because it's a very hard thing to figure out and just to maneuver in my own mind, and not to allow myself to feel too guilty just by association, and not carrying all of that, and just trying to find a way to have some peace and healing after all this is said and done. And I really hope that the families and the victims and everyone involved that has been hurt or affected also get some peace and healing at some point in time, even though I know it's easier to say that than it is to actually have that happen.
Well, I'm going to end where I started, which is he's your brother, but he is not you, and you're not him, and he's not a reflection of you. So I think you need to walk around with your head held high. I think I can tell people that you work with young children, and your heart is obviously in the right place. And, you wouldn't be doing this if you didn't have a conscience and a desire to kind of right the wrong. So I think we all are kind of in awe of you and appreciate you being here. And after the trial, if you want to come back and Josh wants to bring you on, maybe we can have a conversation about how we're all feeling at that point. But really appreciate you being here. Appreciate Josh being here. And obviously Nina Hops and the UK detective tomorrow morning, hopefully at 10:30 a.m. You're going to see a hearing with Sheriff Mickey Steins, accused of killing his he was a bailiff for the judge Kevin Mullins. They were former friends, let's put it that way, but he gunned Kevin Mullins down. And there's a hearing, so we're going to try to take that 12:30. Phil and Scott are here. We're going to be discussing Koberger and having a typical crazy, relaxed, hopefully fun Friday, despite the subject matter. Love you all. Allie, anything else? I just don't want to leave you with something that you feel like you didn't get a chance to say.
I want to thank you for having me on and for making me feel so comfortable. And the comments that I've read have really helped. And I'm really glad I could do this and put my own thoughts out there and show and say my piece, and basically, hopefully get a little closure through this as well.
Not to compare anything, but my daughter had a school interview today and she was feeling really anxious. And I said, it's kind of like a wave. And if you just ride it and come through the other side, you'll feel better. So I'm hoping you feel that way. It is definitely not. Yeah, it's definitely not easy. Please stick around for a second so I can connect you and Josh. Love you, America. Love you, LA. Love you, Northern California, the East Coast, the Republic of Ireland, Tasmania, Australia. You know who you are, South Africa, and everyone near and far between. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.